Hey everybody, how you doing today? It's another hot day outside, so I thought I would get going early this morning and do a little video for my friend Gail, who's having a little bit of trouble using acrylic sprays. So we're down to the table, and I'm going to be focusing on the DecoArt Media Misters, and I'm focusing on these because these are permanent. They're not water soluble like dilutions or those types. Now, I'm a DecoArt helping artist, and basically I love to help people, especially with the DecoArt products, but this expands to even more than that. If you think of acrylics are permanent, where watercolors are water soluble. So acrylics are permanent. So what happens when you take an acrylic spray and you have it in a pump? What happens? Similar to if you use an aerosol spray, like aerosol spray paints, what do they always tell you on the can? That you need to clean the nozzle. Same thing with these. I have to turn them upside down and then pump, and even with that, sometimes they become clogged. So I'm not a fan of misters in general, but I found a way that I can use these misters that's a little bit more friendly to how I want to use them. And for me, because I've got so much electronic equipment around, because the videos, that's my primary focus, is not to make a mess with acrylics on the equipment. So I'm going to show you one way that you can use these. So what I did, and hopefully this is close enough for you. So I took some paper out of a large sketchbook and I just ripped them out of the spiral, and I cut them. So have that. A little bit of glare there, shadow. And I've got a bunch of brushes, and I've got some soft grips, I've got some Aquilons, and I have some dollar store brushes. So just to show that you don't have to have $50 brushes to do this technique. And I also have a piece of what is this? Freezer paper underneath. What I've done with these misters, I've also put a ball bearing, a stainless steel ball bearing inside. I just picked that up at Princess Auto. I think you can get that maybe at Home Depot. And it's just to help, because acrylics, the pigment actually sinks to the bottom. It's just to shake them up. That's why in spray cans you hear that ding, 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 as well as nail polish. You hear that as well. Oh, side note, do you know what I saw at the store? Crayola teamed up with Sally Hansen to create a Crayola line of nail polish. I think that was kind of cute. The colors were a little bit intense for me, so. Oh yeah, and my nails aren't done today because I was doing this. Okay. So what I'm going to do is show you some different ways that you can use these, and on top of that, layering and then some stenciling. So I guess it would help for me to tell you what colors we'll be using, right? So with the DecoArt Media Misters, I'm using yellow green, primary cyan, purple, red, orange, and primary yellow, white, and carbon black. And carbon black is just to show some contrast. They've all been shaken. And this is where it gets kind of messy. So I'm going to bring out a piece of palette paper here. And I'm going to take just the tops off. And then just kind of let them sit there. You know what's going to happen, right? I'm going to knock these over. I have never done this technique on camera without knocking them over. So one of the best ways to use, not one of the best ways, but one of the ways that you can use the sprays is just by taking the top out, and then you can just dab whatever you want. You can even splatter, and then you'll get some big dots. What you can also do, now I don't have it ready because it's going to make a mess, is that you wet the surface, do this, and then the spray drops can actually run all over the paper, almost like a marble effect. I'll use the freezer paper. So what I like to do, yeah, you guys are watching to see if I'm going to drop this stuff, right? So take a little bristle brush and load it with water. Go into your spray. Now, this has phthalo in it, so you know what happens when I use phthalo is I get it all over my fingers. So you can use a brush, bottom up, not top down, because then you'll get the spray all in your face. So you can spray like this. And it can be a very controlled spray by how close you get, a wider spray by how far you get, also with the size of the brush. So see how far this goes? This goes super far. And what I like about these is that the dots are all different sizes. It's more natural. Doesn't look like it came off an assembly line. So you see how intense that color is and how it goes on? Then it goes into the paper. Now this is just regular sketch paper that has not been primed, so it's going to go into the paper, and the color is going to become a little bit more I guess like a pastel color. But if you had gesso on here, then the color would be more vibrant because it wouldn't sink to anything. Okay, so that's with a little bristle brush. So with just a large brush, let me get a different color. So I'm going to wet the paper. Now remember, this is unprimed paper, so the water is just sinking right inside. And I like doing this technique with the DecoArt, the medium misters, because they're permanent. I like doing this technique by wetting the paper, doing the sprays, letting it dry, and then the paper, depending on the color of the spray, then that paper actually works out to put it into a journal, almost like a really old journal. This technique I've done by using, maybe I'll actually show you how I do it. Yeah, I won't spoil the surprise. Let me just show you how to do it. Is to get old looking paper where it's permanent. You can do front and back if you want. This does take a little bit of time to dry. So with the purple, let's go with a little bit of yellow. Yeah, we'll throw a little bit of orange in there. I'm going to mix purple and yellow, a little bit of that orange. Then I end up getting a brown. Making sure that the paper is always wet. Now, if you have little spray bottles, you can do this by taking the mixture, putting it in there, spraying it till you use it all, then you can rinse it out. That way it doesn't clog. I need more yellow. I'm dying to just turn this thing over. I haven't spilled anything yet. So now I'm not adding orange to this one, and you'll get a completely different color. Let's get a little bit of blue in there. And this makes like a vintage type of paper, and the colors that you use is completely up to you, but it's permanent, so you can write on it safely and it's not going to dissolve and go up into your pen. That's one thing that drove me absolutely crazy with the water soluble stuff. There is a place for the water soluble stuff, I just not in the way that I do my art. Why am I crumpling it up? Oops. So now we have beautiful paper with all those wrinkles in there. And now I didn't go right to the very edge just so I could handle it, but if you have a full cover on your table, I cut my paper too short, you can go right to the very edge, but I also tore it. So just be careful when you do this. So ideally what you want to do is take the biggest paper you have, and you maybe even leave a 1-inch border on it if you want. What I like to do is actually put a ruler and then tear my edges so the paper has that torn edge look. Then you can take some, I would say, transparent red iron oxide, and with a bristle brush, have your journal closed, and you can dry brush the end with a transparent red iron oxide to make it look like a burnt edge. It is so cool. Idea number 2. You guys are going to have to remind me of all these ideas. But see, so there we go. So we have a nice thing. So I'm going to put this aside to let it to dry. I'm going to put this aside to dry. And I'll show you when it's finished. So one of the nice things you can do with permanent sprays is that using a brush, you can layer your colors on. So what I suggest is, because lighter colors are harder to cover darker colors, you can start with the light colors first, then work your way up to dark. So using that idea, I want to show you what happens when you use black and white. And we'll do it. Let me see first if this is actually clogged. No. See the mess? It's just, oh. It makes such a mess. And look what I did. I forgot to close this. That's clogged. That's not going anywhere. So, not going anywhere, So we can dippy dot, but what I want to do is show you about the opacity. If you have little containers, I should actually get my little containers out and just pour it into the container. I'm going to close this now. You can use a big brush. And then, I mean, I can use my fingers. Look what's happening to the white. It's just getting, being obliterated by the black. The black is so strong. All really that this is doing, I mean, this is dry here. All this is really doing is just lightening up the black a little bit. There really isn't much that it's doing. So if you want to have something dark and then you want something white that's opaque, go with acrylic paint. That would be your best bet, is to go with acrylic paint. And that way it'll be really opaque. And then the other way that you can get a really controlled spray is use something really small, like a tiny brushes. So if we're using the tiny brushes, again, in water, the water is the key, and that will take some experimenting how much water to load. Now this is a brush with plastic bristles. This is from the dollar store, and you can get really controlled with the tiny brush. Look how controlled you can get with that. So by using a tiny brush when getting a really controlled spray, this is where it comes in handy if you want to do some stenciling. So I've got a nice stencil here. It's a DecoArt stencil designed by Andy Skinner. It's called Creativity. Of course, Creativity. And let's get a fresh piece of paper and we'll use that controlled spray technique. And you can use any stencil for this. I just like this stencil. So I'm just going to get a little bit more red. And now what I'm really doing now is just basically creating my limited palette. So because I don't know what's actually in the blues and the reds and yellows and all that stuff, the actual pigments, this is where it comes handy, is to do some color swatch exercises first to see how the colors come out. I know how they're going to come out, so I'm just going to work with my red, blue, and yellow. Because you can't get a clean orange from any type of color mixing, I'm going to use orange as well, just a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of purple, but I'll put it out there. Oh, and the green. But this bright green, I already know you can do with primary cyan and the primary yellow. And let's throw in, take my big brush and just throw in a little bit of water in these. That orange is really, I think I had some white in there. The orange looks really dissolved. And these work great as watercolors, as like for watercolor style. And I'm going to use my finger again for this. So let's work light to dark. So I'm going to take some yellow and you should tape your stencil down if at all possible. And I'm just going to go over. Now, without knowing where the colors sit on the color wheel, it may be handy for you to look at whether it's my blog or some color theory things, because if you mix like with the purple and the yellow, you'll get I don't call it mud, I call it just a complement mix that's neutral, but in your language you may know it as mud. So what I like to do is use complementary colors next to each other, but only mix them together if you want to neutralize. So with the yellow, if I were to take some purple, rinse the brush a bit, take some purple, then go right down to where Destiny is. And I could spray. I mean, this will take a little bit of a long time. Now, if you're using a spray, you can always put a piece of paper on top and protect all the other parts of the stencil and then just spray. But my goal for this is how to use your acrylic sprays in a different way. So because this paper is unprimed, the paint is just the spray is just sinking into the paper and it's becoming a lot more pastel. I went into purple, don't need to clean, I'm going to go into blue. And this, I know this has phthalo in it, and it's going to make a mess on my fingers. Do you see how I can get a really controlled spray here with the tiny brush? You guys probably can't even see what I'm doing. Getting really, really close. Then I'm going to rinse the brush and go into green and go right inside the green, right inside the blue here. So using a tiny plastic brush will give you a real controlled spray, but it does take a little bit longer. So if I go up now to a bristle brush, so this is a number 5 Bristle Bright. Let's go into some red. And even doing this technique, yes, you can still masking tape or put a piece of paper over some of the words. That's no problem. Take a little bit of yellow, or orange I should say. And the way that I put the spray on the palette or the paper, it still works like regular acrylic, so they will dry out. So take a mister and just spray or reload your brush on a regular basis. And now let's go back to some bright colors. I'm going to go right into purple. Oh, look what I did. Didn't clean my brush. Now I got brown. Brown, and I see some orange coming through now. And how much you go with this. Now I'm just going to mix the colors. Just going to mix. If you're working on a actual formal substrate, something that's going to be the final product that's important, test this technique out first, because I'm looking at this saying, I don't know if I have enough spray on here that will have, so the stencil will have some defined lines. You really could hold your stencil and you can lift it up, and I can see that it does have some nice lines, and put it down without shifting it. Taping it obviously would be a good idea. So then from here I could see where I want something brighter. So as you're doing this, just keep in mind that I'm working on primed paper. So everything is sinking right in. And let's just do one more. Did you guys getting the gist of it now? Let me go with a larger brush. No, you know what? Did I try? Let's try with a synthetic brush. I don't know what the synthetic brush would do. I think it's going to make a mess. Yeah, it's too much. It's too much. So this would be good as a background, not through a stencil. Put that away. You know what I haven't tried? What about stenciling? If we stenciled using a bristle brush. So no water in it. Dry brush. And hold that down. Yeah, it works great. This paint has, the initial layer of the spray has dried, so now I can just overlap. You don't even have to do every letter. Let's do a green. Oops, on paper. I didn't want green right into the red. Green and red are opposite the color wheel, so you're going to get a neutral. This one has water in it. You can see how much thicker that is. Or how much more fluid, I should say. Let's go into the blue. Let's go. Okay, so I'm going to lift this up now. So because the paper is porous, that the actual spray, because it's water-based, well, not water-based, there is water in it, but it's just sucked right into the paper. So if you want something that's a lot more vibrant, just gesso your piece first, and then that'll help you as well. Now, the last thing that nobody likes to do, I don't like doing it, I can't stand it, but then I try to find something good in everything I don't like, and meh. Cleaning the stencils. So when you're cleaning the stencils, ideally is to, as you're using them, if you're doing ideally if you're doing a long project, just put the stencil into a container filled with water so you can clean them at the end. I'm going to close these. Because acrylics are permanent, you really want to clean your stencils, especially where there's words involved, because of the lines. So as I just, if I just wipe this, and you can do this into a journal as well, just wipe the spray into the stencil and then you'll be able to get more words in there. Just a little bit is coming off. The stencil is primarily stained. Now, because of this type of spray, it's not going to damage the stencil unless you were to pour the whole bottle in it dried that way. What I do is when I clean my stencils, I use 1000 plus stain remover. First, there's a DecoArt has a stencil cleaner as well, stencil brush cleaner. That's always the way to start. But because that's so hard for me to find, I use probably for 99% of all my cleaning, 1000 plus stain remover, and it's also known now. It's also known as winning colors, and that you clean wine stains. Red wine stains. So by using the baby wipe, that this came clean. There's a little bits of stain here and there. Nothing that I'm going to worry about. But in the tub, stencil in there, winning colors, or 1000 plus stain remover, and then I'll use a kitchen scrubby specifically just for cleaning my stencils, and I'll use the abrasive part, which is more the plastic, not the wire, and I'll just gently rub. Now this is a hard stencil to do that with because of all the little gumby pokies in it, but just a gentle scrub and that'll get rid of all the paint. But stencils, which are just shapes in that, I don't worry too much about that, but you'll know with the stencils that you have what you want to be, be careful with. Anyway, so that's it. So I hope that this helps you find some different ways to use your sprays. Again, I'm not a fan of the water-soluble sprays. That's just me. So this technique will also work with those sprays. But just keep in mind that if you're going to do the journal page technique, which I'm going to show you in a minute, the actual page technique of aging the paper, if you're using water-soluble stuff, the minute you put if you start using wet media on that, some of that color will come up, even though it's sunk into the paper. So what you can do is use a workable fixative, but then you're getting into an aerosol product to seal something. So just use something permanent for your base, and so the sprays work out really, really well for that. So it hasn't fully dried yet, but you can see that the colors are still intact. And when I prepare pages like this, my actual gear that I have set up here to hold all my lights and my cameras, I take everything off and then I hang everything on their PVC pipes, and I just hang everything with these clothes hangers with these steel clips, or you can even use regular clothesline pegs, and just to hold the paper. So I want to show you some stuff that I've already prepared. Now what I do is when I make my pages, I do them 8 by 10. And I have a press. So this is the press that I picked up at Lee Valley, and it's a flower press. It comes with Velcro straps and that, but you can use any piece of wood or heavy books. So these are just some that I keep them in the press until I need them, especially like today with the humidity. It's going to hit probably about 35 Celsius. So here's one that I made. So I've got one that I stained the pages just with leftover paint, and yeah, I tore it. And then I just used a pamphlet stitch. Where's the middle of this thing? And stitched it together. Okay, and I've got some techniques on my blog on how to do this. So, I mean, this is just something I put together really quick. And this was the Shimmer Mister, the Shimmers, which is the magenta shimmer. That's the white shimmer right there. And it's permanent, so I can write and paint on this and nothing's gonna happen. So then here, now these ones here, what I did is I took my original Masterson Stay Wet palette, took everything out, and I created a wash in there, and all I did was I was making my stuff in there to get it to the very edge. And what it does is it quickly stains both sides, and then dripping and hanging them up a certain way, the paint drips and creates all these beautiful, beautiful patterns. So you can see where I use primarily the oranges here with color mixing, more yellows. And I mean, that's a beautiful way to age some paper. And this one here, much brighter yellow. And this shimmers again. So, and by just folding that, and all of a sudden you have now a nice journal that you can work with. Because these pages are super thick like this, what I recommend to do is maybe do, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Make each signature 5. Well, maybe you can build it more than 5. You can go, you know, maybe 5 or 6, stitch those, and then put them all together into one cover. Or use a Coptic stitch. Coptic stitch, you can get away with probably about 5 or 6 signatures to put everything together. But it's a great way to use, a different way to use your shimmer misters and the regular DecoArt misters for creating age papers for your art journals. So I hope this gives you some ideas on how to use your DecoArt media misters and any other type of mister, keeping in mind I'm focusing on permanence with this lesson, and give you some different ideas. And you can even use this technique if you did this on like watercolor paper. Take this, cut it down into ATC sizes, cut it down into twinchy sizes, which is 2 by 2, inchy sizes, which is 1 by 1. Cut it down into postcards. Your background is already done for you. You don't have to sit there with a blank page and go, what do I do now? I'm stuck. So just by using even leftover paint on your palette to do all this type of stuff. Instant backgrounds. And you know what? Every single one is different. They may have a similar color scheme and a similar striations as they dry, but they're all different. Alrighty, so I'd like to hear from you. What do you think? Does this give you some ideas on how you can use your misters or even leftover paint? So share in the comments below. Let me know what you think, and I look forward to hearing from you. So until I see you in my next video, stay inspired.